What's up, everybody? We're here to talk about the Bayou. So I thought that I might grab a couple of friends who were interested in that topic. How's it going, Nate?
Hey, how's it going?
You want to introduce yourself to the folks?
I sure will. I'm Nate Luckett, of Steam Powered Scoundrels, General Gremlin Menace, and Bayou fan. Figure that's why I'm here.
Absolutely. How about you, Gary?
I'm Gary Ginderhall. I am just a general member of the various Malifaux discords out there. I don't have my own podcast or YouTube channel, so I'm a bit of an outcast in the discussion compared to you guys. But much like the Gremlins were in first edition.
Indeed.
Exactly. So we have all sort of noticed over the course of, I guess, all of Malifaux history that the Bayou has sort of been, like you say, an outcast. They've been somewhat underrepresented in the lore, and that has been particularly true in the last couple of years. In the Burning Man trilogy, there was very, very little Bayou representation, and not only are they sort of underrepresented in the lore, just in terms of their appearances, but also they tend to not have very much impact on the lore. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about why we think that is, and a little bit about the way that the Bayou, the Gremlins in particular, have been handled in the past, and then maybe get into a little bit about where they could go in the future, some of the potential story arcs that we have not seen, or that they've hinted at, but we haven't seen go anywhere. But I guess just to kick it off, why do you think the Bayou has been underrepresented up until this point? Nate, what do you think?
So I think it comes from the position of it is, at its core, written as a comic relief faction. And I think there have been moves to kind of change that as they've kind of developed over the past couple of editions. But I feel like there might still be friction as far as like writing a greater meta plot that involves, all the humans and even like the Neverborn as a monstrous faction, and including, our favorite silly little goblins and their misadventures, and setting the tone properly. But I think there are aspects of the lore that are changing that might be able to make gremlins more active players in the future.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, is that, going back to, if you look at like first edition lore, when we started seeing the Gremlins showing up more, they were treated like comic relief. They're kind of off doing, slapstick. They're shooting each other. They're getting drunk. They're copying humans, and it's funny. But they don't really get much characterization, and they don't really have much interaction with the humans. And that was also sort of true of the Neverborn. That's actually kind of an interesting point, that the Neverborn weren't really characters back then. They were just kind of boogeymen. That even the ones that had names and did stuff in the background, they didn't really have much story to them.
Yeah, so they were very much like antagonistic forces of nature in the kind of initial release, and then they sort of developed as the game and the world developed.
Yeah, and I think we still see some of that legacy with them, but I do think that Wyrd has repositioned them, especially with some of the newer characters, Titania in particular. But they've turned that ship around quite a bit. I don't think we've seen that with the Bayou yet, though, where, the newer characters are getting added to the Bayou just get no story in some cases, like the Clampets. So,
The Clampets don't even get full-on names, although we maybe possibly
they get implied names.
They have implied names. We kind of maybe know a couple of them. The only one we know for sure is the little. In Clampets 1, you have the one little kid who's on the fishing pole. That's Junior, and that's the only one we actually know the name of.
And what's this? We know the Silurid's name for sure.
That's Sally. Yeah, that's Sally.
Yeah, we know
Sally.
We know the name of the boat they cruise around on. We don't know their individual.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing that comes to mind is that, even when obviously there have been stories that feature gremlins, and they make appearances in stories occasionally, but when we do see them, they tend not to impact the larger story or the state of the world very much. They very rarely interact with humans, and when they do interact with humans, it's kind of only minor characters or like nobody characters that if they even get
and
a
almost
they're not
almost solely as antagonists as well.
Right. So we a couple of stories that we see gremlins interacting with humans are like Bullet, where Sommer goes to the city. Sommer and Brewy go to the city and they play a drinking game, a shooting and drinking card game with Von Schill to try to get some information out of him. What are some of the other stories where they interact with humans at all?
There's the story where they first come up with where Zoretta sows the seeds of the demo crazy, where she's just like, you guys got to come together because right now you're like a bunch of different fingers. Ophelia's the cute little pinky, and then Summer's the big fat thumb, and that sort of thing.
Yeah,
if you come together, you make a mighty fist.
Really count, I don't think, as a human. I mean, she's technically a human, but
that gives you frame of reference for how rarely the gremlins actually show up in stories involving actual playable characters in the game,
right.
other than extremely rare scenarios.
The Democrazy incident falls more under the gremlins aping human aspects and culture, whereas like things like the Brewmaster story in the third edition Bayou book, where he's facing down against Thunder's agents who are like, "Hey, you betrayed us. That's a messed up thing you did." And again, that's as an opposing force against a very minor character with zero change to kind of the like the status has already been changed.
Mm-hmm.
He's already been changed to just a Bayou character, and he is now like fighting mooks.
Yeah, fighting an enforcer. That's enforcer, not in the game sense, but in the general sense of like, this is just a person that they sent. It's not anybody important.
I believe none of the humans in that story actually have names. It's literally just Popcorn Turner, something Jones, and just Gremlin characters. The only ones who actually have names.
I thought the lady might have had a name, but I can't remember. Yeah,
they might have named the crime boss, but
yeah, if she had a name, it was not somebody important, and she's never shown up any other time. So
minion name number 1,
right?
Exactly.
And also to your point, it didn't change the status of the world. And actually, kind of to make it worse, Brewmaster was set up as this double agent, and he's got this whole history with the Ten Thunders. And he betrays the Ten Thunders, but we don't even get a story about that or why he did it or how he did it. We got told that in the vignettes in, I think it's Ripples.
We got a paragraph,
right, where we get like a paragraph on the status of every master. It's just like a little check-in, and that's where we hear that Brewmaster like decided that he doesn't want to mess with the Ten Thunders anymore. So we got to that point, like the status of the world, in the sense, the kind of larger issue is a footnote, and then we just get this little combat scene where they try to jump him in the woods and he beats them up.
Yeah, the resolution of that action.
Right. Yeah. But none of the personal interaction or the character motivation.
Yeah, what's interesting specifically about Brewmaster is we know he was raised by the Ten Thunders from almost birth, or he was like kidnapped as a very, very young child, which implies he was maybe 2 or 3 months old when he was kidnapped, because a gremlin reaches adulthood at about 7. So we're talking really, really young. How long do they have him? Because how long has it been since humans came back through the portal? It's been like 11, 12, 13 years.
Yeah, and at that point it would have been less, because that would have been, a handful of years ago from now.
Yeah. And we know that the Ten Thunders had their own portal they were going through and doing stuff all over the place, which is why we have families like the Numa and the Longs and the Tong family, I believe. Yeah. And the question is he old for a gremlin? Because he acts like he's old for a gremlin. He got the pose where he's all, withered and old, holding the staff. But then you've got Moonshiner, where he's doing a huge Bruce Lee Enter the Dragon, kung fu kick in midair. And so I think it would be really interesting, because all the other gremlins are like, oh yeah, he's this super old, wizened, effectively like religious figure for the gremlins. What if he's just pretending to be old and is actually just like, yeah, I'm like 9?
And that makes sense. That makes sense for someone who would have been trained by the Ten Thunders as a deceiver.
Right. Yeah.
He was raised by old Shaolin masters who probably, when they weren't kicking ass, shuffled around a little bit.
I think in my head, I always thought of that as an affectation, that like they look up to him as this wise old man, but he's not necessarily old. That it's just it's just, again, they're sort of copying human behavior, so they see us sort of giving deference to our elders, and that's sort of why they treat him that way. But yeah, I think the age of the Gremlins is a problem that Wyrd has written for themselves, unfortunately, where like
Wrote themselves into a corner.
yeah, because most of the Bayou characters should be dead soon. Like they're not gonna make it much longer, even if they survive the the trials and tribulations of living in the Bayou. So I'll be curious to see what they do with that. I can't imagine that they're just gonna kill off every Bayou master in the next 2 or 3 years because they're all aging out. But
I was gonna say, it comes sixth edition. Somerset Chief Jones dies of old age. Montauk gets dead of old age, and the new masters of that crew is Lenny and Trixie Bell. And they're
if
the new
even that, like they should all, they should all be getting up there at this point, right? Like they
Yeah, like honestly, any of the, especially the legacy characters from first edition are getting aged.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows? Maybe it's a quality of Gremlin life thing where maybe they can live longer because they have slightly more civilized, and the trappings of society have slowly increased the length of the life of a Gremlin.
Right, maybe they only had such short lifespans because they killed themselves and they didn't have the opportunity.
And they lived in a swamp with no
yeah.
They live in
no
a swamp
safety
where
net.
there's alligators that can climb trees, and the plants can eat a full-grown 6-foot tall human in a single bite.
6-foot long mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Or the other way they handle it is just to say like the event extended their lifespan beyond the normal life. We get like a little footnote somewhere that says something like that. Because again,
I think if they don't kill off those older characters, I think it'll be something along the lines of, because they're so important to the weave of fate, their lives have been extended until the final moment where they have achieved whatever role they're supposed to play in the ongoing weave of the future. But
that implies plot relevance.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit. So, every other faction, with possibly the exception of the Outcasts, has had like they have, at least to an extent, they have like established goals, and everybody in that faction may not be exactly aligned with what their goals are, but the guild is about running the city of Malifaux and exporting soulstones for profit, and the Neverborn are about stopping the tyrants from coming back and also kind of resisting the expansion of the humans, and the Arcanists are about freedom for mages and sort of taking power away from the guild if possible. And everybody's got sort of their reason for being. The Bayou is maybe the least unified of all the factions. Their sort of reason for being seems to be to fight each other, by the nature of their their biology or whatever it might be. But we do sort of get an overall story that has been hinted at a handful of times, and we've never really gotten a payoff on it. And that is this idea that Zoraida is trying to unite them so that they can oppose everyone, some coming war, some coming conflict. It's come up multiple times, and the last time it came up was when they instituted the democracy and elected Lenny as their president.
Or Gremlin General.
Yeah, the Gremlin General, like the Governor General. And, it's weird because it got hinted at a bunch, but then it never went anywhere, and we never really get any follow-through on it. But we know that they did it now, and it's not clear to what extent they are unified, or kind of cooperating, because they're still gremlins, so they're still fighting each other. But how do you think that is going to or has impacted their relationship with the rest of the world up to this point, without getting too much into like future stuff yet?
Yeah, and I think, like as you said previously, I think that still kind of puts them in that, because they are technically fall under the umbrella of Neverborn. It leaves them in that antagonistic, defensive, like they are concerned about the borders of the Bayou, other than like Zip, essentially, and Zoraida doesn't count. And that's kind of it. Their struggles are self-contained in one area. And until there's maybe an expansion on that, or something actually trying to concern itself with the happenings in the Bayou, that it's still self-contained.
The Bayou has a very selfish nature almost, in that they really all the characters have very small goals. Ulix raises pigs and doesn't really care about doing anything other than raising pigs. Somerteeth Jones just wants to get drunk, although he also just likes having good things. So he doesn't need much more of a motivation other than, I'm just going to steal human crap. And Ma Tucket is very similar.
Oppressing women.
Say again?
He also is very concerned about oppressing women. That's his other goal.
Yeah, that's true. But
known misogynist Somerteeth Jones. That's a fact.
In the smallest, most threadbare defense, he's seen what happened the last time a woman got control of a Gremlin family, and Ma Tucket's caused him no end of trouble since.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that goes to show, like, the two of them worked together because there was, something they wanted on the borders of the Bayou, the pumping station where they stole a bunch of shit that mostly Ma took. And even like Ophelia dealing with the abominations crawling out of the crater of the red cage. Like there are things happening, but it's all contained.
Yeah, I think, Gary, you make a good point of, like, they all have very selfish or kind of small scale concerns and motivations that they're dealing with. But that's true of most of the other, almost every character in the game has their own motivation that is specific to them, but it still causes them to interact with other people and other people outside of their faction, but that's less true.
And that's the difference being those other factions are, realistically just that. They are factions, they are organizations that have their own overarching goals that have to come into conflict with personal goals from the characters. Whereas the Bayou, if a Bayou character has a personal goal, there's no overarching structure that tells them to not do that thing or gives them stress to not do that thing.
The Gremlins are very similar to basically the Outcasts, but they're moist. They're just they're
moist outcasts.
Because you really can't ever under any circumstance see Hamelin working with Von Schill. And you can see like Ophelia working with like Ulix, but neither one is going to really do anything in terms of like moving the plot forward, other than Ophelia raiding the Latigo. That's important to the people who live in Latigo, but Ulix has no reason to even care what the people in Latigo are doing.
And even going back to Outcast, there is almost like a subset of like the masters and characters who have unified under Freiholt, right? So you have like the mercenaries, the Freikorps, like the characters who have kind of an organized structure, and they, it's a fairly loose structure, but there is still like a unit there.
Yeah, versus all of them but Hamlin and Zip, really, right?
Yeah, and Parker's kind of like in between, like he's a criminal. He does what
he's going to work with whoever is going to give him the greatest number of opportunities to make more money,
right?
And that's going to, if Freiholt's willing to pay him, I'm sure he wouldn't turn down a law-abiding job,
right?
Yeah,
and I think even the same could be said of Resurrectionists, because that's a fairly loose structure, but they have a common interest over the whole. And sometimes that brings them together.
They also have a unifying structure, which is the Whisper and the Graveyard Spirit, which is, even if it's like a good necromancer, like kinda Molly, kinda Reva, like those are people who are still influenced by the Graveyard Spirit. At the end of the day, everyone's going to be a little bit crazy because everyone's been touched by the spirit.
Yeah, I think with the Rezzers in particular, and I guess with the Outcasts as well, it's like the common enemy of the guild is what brings them together. And again, we've kind of seen some overtures to that with the Bayou, but it's never really gone anywhere. And I think, Nate, what you were talking about with, like, I guess what you were both talking about with their lack of a higher goal or a
higher structure.
Yeah, a unifying structure or organization. It's meant that there hasn't been much development of a lot of those characters, in the sense that when we do get stories about them, even the handful that we've gotten, they tend to, because they're very self-concerned and they're just kind of doing their own thing, they tend to just be, I have this problem, I will apply bullets and or fists, and then the problem will
Spoons.
go away. And then that's the end of it, right? And some of the most interesting, at least to me, some of the most interesting stories that we get about Gremlin characters are those ones where they're not fighting, they're talking about the kind of like the first, I can't remember the name of the story, I should have put it in my notes, but the first story, I think it was like early second edition, where Zoraida calls them all together and sort of makes that speech about the fist, where she says, the gremlins are like fingers and we gotta make a fist out of them and join them all together. We get some really interesting insight into the characters in that story, and then the Democracy story in particular, where again we get plenty of gremlin-y shenanigans and like the flavor of the Bayou culture and all that kind of stuff, but we do still get this little bit of insight into them as people and this sort of non-violent conflict that's going on in terms of the politics of who's gonna lead them and whether that's something they want to do in the first place.
I think there's the demo crazy specifically was their big moment of like, yup, this is what's going to make the Gremlins plot relevant. And then they were like okay, who's gonna actually be the Gremlin general while we're writing the story? And they're like, who's gonna actually be the leader of the faction? And if it's Somer, does that work? Does this one work? And then they were like, okay, what's the funniest answer? And the funniest answer was Lenny Jones.
They fell back to funny.
They fell back to funny. I still think that there's, and I'll talk about this more later on in the thing, but I think there's still room for growth there. Mm-hmm. But they definitely put a leader in charge where Lenny has no real motivation to go out and actually do anything in terms of like going out of the Bayou. And he's not even really all that interested in actually uniting the Gremlins under the demo crazy, other than being like, I mean, they explicitly call it out in the paragraph blurb about Gremlin Criers, where they don't really do anything other than just go around and clang bells and shout at people saying that Lenny's a new Gremlin general. Okay, what do we do about that? I'm just like,
what does that mean for a Gremlin?
Well, and we also know that like Lenny didn't get elected because Lenny wanted to be the Gremlin general and everybody supported him. He's kind of the stooge. Like, he got put there as the guy that's easily manipulated. And in the most recent book, somebody said that they specifically orchestrated that. Was it English Ivan that said that? That he had an operative that got somebody put in power in their...
I don't remember that at all.
It's
in the story, I haven't read it.
I'm going to have to look.
I'll have to double check that.
There was definitely something recently that was like, yeah, we even got... Oh, no, you know what it was? It was... It's not that it was a recent story. It's that I read it recently. The story where Misaki takes over and kills her father.
Oh,
One of his generals that she's sort of like manipulating behind the scenes before she kills him, one of his generals tells her that he has an agent that infiltrated the Bayou and manipulated that. So I don't know if he was... he wasn't talking about Brewmaster because this is after Brewmaster left the Thunders, but... there's at least some indication that other people were in on this. Like there was multiple forces at work trying to get Lenny in particular elected because they knew he was easy to manipulate. So, or dumb and gonna lead to a lack of organization.
Our sweet boy.
There is again another tiny little hint of something where at the start of the story where Somer and Maud team up to raid that pumping station. Lenny actually comes up with like, gee, Dad, I sure done noticed that Ma Tuckett's really pushing you to do this thing, even though you said you weren't going to do it. And he says several very insightful things, and it shows that he isn't quite as dumb as he acts and looks and dresses and sounds and has acted in the past and will probably act in the future, but...
Yeah, he's kind of got that Sebastian thing going on where it's like he seemed like an idiot, but maybe he's actually smart and he just plays the idiot. But with Lenny, with Sebastian, it seems like Sebastian is, again, I think it's a little inconsistent the way that both characters are written.
Oh, for sure.
But with Lenny, I'm sorry, with Sebastian, my read on it is Sebastian, if you want to kind of make them all the interpretations of the character vibe, I think the interpretation is Sebastian is relatively smart. He plays dumb to kind of stay in his position and his role, and he exerts his intelligence when it's required. He kind of does the smart thing when he needs to do the smart thing, but otherwise he just wants to kind of blend into the background. With Lenny, it almost seems like he was accidentally getting the right things. Like, you don't get the sense that Lenny's normally actually the smart guy that actually understands the depth of what's going on, and he just kind of called it out. Then, at least to me, I got the sense that it was like he was saying something that should have been dumb. He was accidentally right. Is that the same vibe that you guys got from that story? Because that's what I got.
Well, I feel like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like he literally does have an ability called Random Bout of Brilliance.
Right.
So I'm sure that definitely is part of it, where there's not an awful lot going on with him mentally.
It's a broken clock situation.
Yeah, it's a broken clock situation, but I do think that he has something that almost all gremlins don't have, which I think he does have some level of common sense and a level of self-preservation. And I don't think he'll ever be able to read, but I'm pretty sure that he's not going to stick his hand in a fire a second time, if you catch my drift. It's like, ow, I got burned. Not going to do that again. Whereas most gremlins like, ow, that hurt. Did it though? And ow.
I think also what they were trying to convey with that bit is that unlike Somer and unlike basically all of the Bayou Masters, save maybe Ulix, Lenny doesn't have an ego. So that's why he's going to see like, hey, Dad, think you're getting a little manipulated. Like, if you pay attention and stop thinking about your own stuff for like 2 seconds, you're not going to listen to me.
Yeah, I think that whole part of that story was serving the purpose of like showing Somer's fallibility and like his flaw, which is his ego for sure. I'm just, again, and I think maybe this is he's just not written consistently between the different authors, or maybe this is something that they're intentionally changing. I'm not sure that we've seen hints of that before, because every other time, the few other times that we've seen him, he has just been like the more mentally deficient son, almost to an uncomfortable extent in some cases.
Yeah, bordering problematic degree.
Right. And if they're moving away from that, then that's potentially good, but I'll be curious if, I don't know if that's an intentional decision or if that was like, this serves this specific moment to develop Somer's character for this interaction and just to show that how he's so easy to manipulate because of his pride, or if that was supposed to be about Lenny kind of coming out of his shell.
Sure.
So before we get into like future stuff, do you both have a favorite Gremlin character and a favorite Gremlin story, and why? And they don't have to be the same thing. It doesn't have to be a story about that character if you have a particular one.
My favorite story is for sure the Bullet story. I think that's probably some of the best characterization we get from. It's not for the Bayou as a whole, but for those two characters of Somer and the Brewmaster, and to a very, very lesser extent, Von Schill. Von Schill is basically, he could be anyone. You could replace him with like half a dozen other named characters in the game. Anyone who basically enjoys a drink.
Right.
But
I think the reason they chose Von Schill for that was intentional, to pick someone who has like iron will. They wanted to showcase that like they wanted an iron will and someone you assume can handle a drink or two.
Yeah,
and someone who also doesn't have a vested interest in hating the Gremlins, right? They wouldn't want to put a guild character there because that probably wouldn't work.
Yeah,
you get the sense.
My favorite character
doesn't, he wouldn't feel one way or the other about the Gremlins if they're not part of a job he's doing.
Exactly. My favorite character, and one that I think is very heavily underutilized, is Big Brain Bryn. I actually won a tournament, a Henchman Hardcore tournament 2 days ago with him.
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm very happy with that. But he's a character that, again, I feel like he's the candidate for something that's different from the typical Gremlin characterization, which is just like goofy, wacky goblin stuff. They're basically Warcraft goblins in a lot of ways, but without noses and without the technological expertise. They like explosions, they like having fun, they like goofing around. And Big Brain Brain is actually really smart, and he knows what he wants to do in life, which is take over the world and make people respect him. But he has ended up being a henchman for Ma Tucket, when he was previously a versatile character. And I want to see him more in future stories, which I'll go into more later.
So Bullet and Big Brain Brain. What about you, Nate?
That's it's like choosing your favorite child. It changes. It changes almost weekly.
It doesn't have to be set in stone. You can just pick one.
Yeah,
what's the knee jerk?
Like one of the ones that really always comes to mind really quickly is Wong. I'm a big Wong fan, and that's another character I think they could utilize more. Like he has a relic with Oni in it. He has the 3 demon bag. Like there's something you can do with that. Other than just like, oh, he talks to them and misunderstands them and uses their magic.
Yeah.
And with an honorable mention to not really a character as much as just a profile, but Swinehurst. I'd be remiss to not mention my favorite model in the game, Swinehurst. It's just great execution of the werewolf concept in a different way.
Yeah.
I remember they used to have a demise that let you turn them into either a piglet or a Bayou Gremlin. And now I think they just turn into
just Bayou Gremlin, yeah.
Yeah, but I really like the idea that you could get a Swinehurst from one of 2 different directions. You could start with a Bayou Gremlin and turn it into a Swinehurst, or you start with a piglet and then gremlinize it and turn it into
fuse
a swine.
it. I feel like you'd get one of each and you'd slam them together, and that's how that magic works.
Like that Quest for Camelot movie where they had that magic pit that fused people with objects.
And favorite story, I mean, other than Bullet, because Bullet really is just like really just a really good blend of integrating gremlins with people and in a non-violent conflict. But beyond that, I did really enjoy the one, and this might have even been in the Outcast book, where Parker and Zip meet up and then decide they're gonna just try to steal the hanging tree.
It's definitely a fan favorite for sure.
I love those two. I love the 2 of them. I love their dynamic, and that's another route I hope maybe opens up gremlin human relations, if you will.
Yeah, I like that story a lot, specifically because it's one of the first times, I think it's probably off the top of my head, the only real like human gremlin interaction that meant anything.
And where they're specifically working together.
Right, and it wasn't just like it was still plenty Bayou shenanigans going on, obviously, but it wasn't just this person fights this person or this is a scary threat in the distance like Sommer was in first edition. He was just kind of like shooting at Perdita while she was doing plot relevant things.
He was a thing to fight.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas this feels like a thread that, I mean, it is. We know it's continuing. It's one of the few like consistent through threads for Gremlins in the edition. Currently,
it's the one mention we got in the last book.
It's literally the only Ashes of Malifaux Bayou mention.
Right.
Zip has realized, oh no, we're not very plot relevant. I have to grab to some other character and hold on for dear life. And that's the only way I'll actually stay in the story and have my name mentioned more than.
I mean, he also wants to kiss Parker, but that's a different story.
It wouldn't be a podcast or a conversation with a member of the Steam Powers Council if we didn't talk about somebody kissing someone. So
it's true.
Yeah, I think Zip could do better.
Yeah, there you go.
But does he want to do better?
No, he doesn't. He's got one hubby, and it's Parker.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming to save him.
And kind of Maris, and that's it.
They are obsessed with each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick one, the Gremlin General is probably like, if you just asked me off the cuff, that would probably be my answer. But the Hanging Tree story might actually be my favorite one for that specific reason, that it's really the first good interaction we get. And especially because of the fact that it seems like that's something they're continuing. It wasn't just a one-off thing. Although I will say that the Bullet story not only gets us the interaction between the Gremlins and the humans, I don't think that's the important part of that story. To me, that was the first time that we got a lot of development of the Gremlins as characters, because there is some really good interaction between Sommer and Brewmaster in that story, where Sommer keeps like being super sycophantic towards Brewmaster and like really kissing his ass, and at some point Brewmaster like yells at him for it. And I thought that was actually some pretty good that was a pretty good dynamic between the two of them to see that play out, because again, we don't usually get dialogue or like that's more than just, you know, there is thing, we will fight thing, and then we go fight thing. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think my favorite Bayou character, just in terms of like what we've gotten from them so far, is Zip, because he plays into a lot of the Bayou tropes, but in a way that I think are more interesting. You know, the overall trope of the Bayou, or the thing about them, their defining characteristic, is that they copy human culture, but in like gremlinized ways, like not perfectly. So they take our cultural touchstones and then like warp them slightly in their weird little gremlin heads. But his thing is that he like listened to audio dramas on the Ethervox and got obsessed with like achieving fame and well, infamy, I suppose. And glory by being you know, he was listening to a crime drama or whatever it might happen to be, which I think is a really interesting angle, because it still has the gremlin element of like he's gonna go out and do crimes, but like you don't get the sense that he's bad natured about it. Like he's not out to hurt people. He just actually wants to be well known for being a criminal.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't
like
kill people indiscriminately, but he will take your stuff and make a big speech about it, because that's like what he cares about more, which I find funny and interesting.
He's very much like I was just gonna say he's very much like Captain Shakespeare from oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of the book now. The book about the falling star. If I remember the name, I'll look it up, and if I remember, I'll tell you in a minute. But it's basically a guy who was an actor, and he was hired, or he was basically kidnapped by pirates, and they were like, and then he was like, oh yeah, well I'm a pirate myself, and he just pretended to be a pirate, and they were like, oh cool, what's your name? And you're like, oh, I'm Captain Shakespeare, because he was a Syrian actor, and ever since then he became the captain of an entire actual like lightning pirate crew, because they ran around and illegally stole lightning, because it's kind of fantasy book it was. And he was then he encounters the two protagonists, like, oh thank God, someone who isn't a pirate. I can actually talk to a real person. And very similar, Zip is not. He's not a pirate because he wants to steal things or he wants the money. I don't even think he really even cares about that stuff. He's already got everything he could ever want. He has a crew. He has a first mate. He has a flying ship. What more could a flying pirate need other than?
He has a guy who can operate the flying ship.
Exactly. And so
your point, or
so everything he does at this point is just continuing the. I guess LARP is almost the right word for it.
Absolutely.
The charade that he's just. Yep, this is just what I am now. What do pirates do? They steal things. I'm stealing things, I guess.
I was just gonna add that I feel like it's a very human thing to like be out to get your name out there more than you are for the material things. There's certainly some historical precedent for people who were like more interested in the fame and glory than the material wealth or anything like that. They just want the prestige.
Zip cares about non-gremlin opinions.
Yes.
And that makes him different.
Yeah.
He steals pianos, not because he wants to own pianos or because he cares about selling pianos. He steals them just to drop on people. That's all he does. Is he just drops pianos on people because that's something he heard of in a story one time. Is a big heavy object falling on a guy. He's like, oh, I have a thing that's high up and a person down here. I'll just drop an object off it. It's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's a good blueprint as we kind of move into talking about future things and where they might go with some of the gremlins. I think he's a good blueprint for how you can make a character that's more interesting, also allow them to interact with other parts of the Malifaux universe and not just in the Bayou, but still keep the Bayou flavor. They don't have to just become humans and stop being gremlins. They can still be gremlins at heart, but have some larger plot relevance. And I think Zip is a good example of how that can happen, and I'd like to see them kind of try to do that with some of the other characters.
Yeah.
My honorable mention and my this is the character that I have the most hope for in the future is Ophelia. I think that she's the exception because she's like the 1 in 1,000 smart gremlin. She's like way smarter than the other gremlins. which is interesting because if you live in a society full of idiots and you're the smart one, I think there's potentially interesting places that could go, but I think there's a lot of potential for where her character can go. And I also think that she's been an interesting character. She hasn't really gotten much in terms of like narrative so far. I guess Montucket might be a better example of this, but one of the things that I think the Bayou that's interesting about the Bayou is that in Malifaux, just as a premise, sexism and racism have kind of gone away. They're not entirely gone. They're not out of the picture. We still get examples of them, but for the most part, because the guild is it cares more about, taking advantage of people irrespective of their gender or sex or race. It's kind of not a thing. And the Bayou to me has always served as this like counterexample of like, we're going to contrast we're going to show how backwards they are by like showing that they still have misogyny and Sommer is still like a bigot. And like, aren't these so funny and backwards people because all these other humans, even though it's 100 years ago, have gotten past all that stuff. But we then see that most of the most powerful and the smartest and the best people in their society are women. So I think that the female Gremlin characters have a lot of potential because I think that's an interesting angle. And like, you see in the Democracy story that like they're clearly the better leaders, but you still have all the men being like desperately clinging to this idea that they can't be the Gremlin general because it has to be a man, even though we have all these examples of people who are clearly more cut out and like other people want to vote for them. So I think that's another funny aspect of the Bayou.
I think part of it is that they are the joke of the sexism is that they have stolen that from the humans to a certain extent. Where I imagine that there was, I have no real evidence of this, but I imagine that before Gremlins ever came in contact with humans, there really wasn't much of a sexism component until they saw, oh yeah, humans, only the men were leaders and they had big hats, and women didn't wear big hats and they stayed indoors and had a lot of kids. And so we already have our ladies staying indoors mostly and having a lot of kids. I guess the men just always lead. And I'm sure that's at least part of the joke of the sexism, but that just is part of them being a comedy faction, is that a core aspect of their society is basically a joke.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the lore that supports that, but I think it's a reasonable deduction to make that they've gotten that from us because they get everything else from us. But yeah, I think that's kind of the point, right? Is that it shows how ridiculous that behavior is by kind of making, they exaggerate it a little bit more and it shows the silliness of it. But I think that, again, that to me, that kind of shows the potential of developing a lot of these characters and a lot of these stories that has sort of been untapped to this point, because it's like that's an interesting element of their society, and it's kind of just been, I mean, the joke is fun, like it works in some cases, but there's more potential there, I think.
And like when you think about it, like the Gremlins haven't been like civilized, like a civilized species for that long.
Yeah, less than 100 years.
Like they started picking up stuff after the first breach, and then like really amped it up when the second wave came in. So like they have accelerated what they are as a civilization in like 10 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like they got the first little dribbles of salt the first time, and then just immediate explosion in what they are. And that's part of the growing pains of a growing civilization. So they're fast adapters in whatever direction they're going.
You see that in the remnant of the Gatro Bokors are pretty close to what their tribal society was like before they ever saw humans. And then you have these guys riding mechanical pigs and doing all these other crazy things. And you have to remember 50, 60 years ago, the species didn't have fire almost. I don't even think they lived in structures.
I don't think they had language before the first breach opening. I think that's something they said. So these people were literally not speaking 100 years ago. Like,
they were basically swamp apes. They didn't have agriculture or farming. Essentially, they weren't herding pigs at that point yet. So like they didn't have a society. They were just creatures in the swamp.
I remember that there's I don't remember what story it was that talks about when they first encountered humans. Like, oh man, these guys live in actual houses. That's a thing you can do. And that was when they started making shacks and shanty towns. Was after they saw human structure. They're like, we can do that. Oh, come on, why weren't we doing that before?
It makes you wonder where the rest of the Neverborn were all this time, because like they have an organized society. Like they're obviously not quite as civilized, but they're they wear clothes and live in structures, I guess, to an extent. So it's kind of funny, but I guess maybe they just were far enough away, and then Neverborn just didn't care about the Gremlins, so they stayed away from them.
Yeah.
But let's get into a little bit of theory crafting here, or prognosticating. I think there's a lot of things that have been sort of hinted at as story arcs that we might see in the future. And in some cases, it seems like they're things that should have happened already, and they just either ignored or have been putting off kind of exploring further. And then there's also, I think, a couple of characters that like there isn't really a clear direction for their character to go, but maybe some of us have some ideas or some wish lists about where we might see things go. So I thought it might be interesting just to talk about what we could see in the future. If we assume that Wyrd has any desire to make the Bayou more relevant to the overall plot, again, there is one future here where we just keep getting more of the same, where it's just a bunch of slapstick stories and none of them ever, none of the Gremlins ever do anything important. But if we live in the future that we want here for a little bit, what's a story that you'd like to see, or a sort of arc that you'd like to see them develop? Gary, you want to take a crack at it?
I have a two-part, extremely nuclear hot take.
Let's go. Let's hear it.
Starting with a showstopper.
The big thing is for Gremlins, because they're so selfish. Like I said, as a society, you have to make it personal. Mm-hmm. So the step one is making it personal, and to do that is step two: kill your darlings. They've got to permanently kill, not just Dead Man's Hand. I want that character removed from the game. One of the currently playable masters, and that would give the demo crazy a reason to be like, they killed Somerteeth Jones. What the hell? Time to actually invade Malifaux, because this thing that will make them plot relevant is if Gremlins are in Malifaux. As they are, they're way over here. You have Malifaux as a city way up here, and there's all this space between them. If you can get Gremlins in Malifaux for whatever reason, even if they're just straight up actually invading, that's when you start seeing plot relevance. And the way you do that is to have one of just any character killed and have some other henchman or enforcer in that crew become the new leader. Somerteeth Jones is the first answer, where it's just like...
He's the most obvious.
He's the most obvious. You kill Somerteeth Jones, and Lenny's like, my dad's dead. What do you do about that? And then you do all sorts of crazy things. Here's a really interesting one that I thought of, which is... Lenny is currently a parody of Mice and Men. There's another mouse story that I think is also could be pretty interesting, Flowers for Algernon, where they basically, those thinking caps that Big Brain Bryn made? I said I'd mention Big Brain Bryn again. What if Lenny's like, I'm too dumb to actually lead the Gremlins in revenge for the death of my father? I need a thinking cap. And Big Brain Bryn's like, ooh, do you need really? And then he makes him a thinking cap. Lenny gets smart, and then all the other Gremlins in the Bayou were like, oh no, now we actually have a leader who's actually doing things. And Lenny's like, all right, let's do this. I have actual instructions for everybody. There's rules now. And all the Gremlins like, great. But they do it, and then they do whatever's necessary to become plot relevant by invading Malifaux or attacking Malifaux. Or even, they don't even necessarily need to get into Malifaux, just that they are now approaching just conquest wave leaving the Bayou for Malifaux. And
this is what I'm here for. This is why
I was not mentally prepared for cyborg Darth Lenny. But here we are. I'm very into it.
Even bigger hat. I want to be wearing like a big a Napoleon style hat that only sort of covers up the thinking cap you can see underneath. And I want him to be just like a leader of his men, and just like he's smart because of the thinking cap and angry because his dad's dead. And the other kill your darlings moment I have is kill the Brewmaster. Just have him actually be killed by the 10 Thunders.
It hurts my heart.
And it does.
That one hurts me too, but that is a reasonable shout.
The Brewmaster is hands down my single favorite master in Malifaux. Big Brain Bryn's my favorite character. Brewmaster's my favorite playable master. But we already have a way of keeping his crew relevant by having Wesley upgrade
Take up
into
the
the new
role.
brewmaster, and then we can have an actual brewmaster that has a name, because currently the brewmaster doesn't even have a name. And brewmaster's death is not only relevant because all the gremlins like him. I don't think there's any gremlins in the setting other than Popcorn Jones, Popcorn Turner, who
And
don't
that's like a
like
friendly
him.
rivalry
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
actual hatred.
Yeah, that's like a Wile E. Coyote style relationship more than anything else. And with his death, not only does it mean that the gremlins are really pissed, and then again, they can invade, they can start doing things. Someone Tooth Jones was like, one of the few people I really respected in this world is dead. Time to be mad about that. But he could be, I have a very specific vignette in my mind of people have been trying to kill him for a while, and Misaki herself is ripshit pissed, and so she goes and has this big climactic duel with Brewmaster, and she knocks him to the floor, and she's like, "Do you have anything to say before I, chop off your head and kill you?" And he's like, both of us are creations of the Ten Thunder, raised from birth into being very specific weapons. And have you ever considered that? Have you ever thought about the fact that, like, you really don't have a life outside the Ten Thunders? I'm the one guy, I was very similar. I had no life outside the Ten Thunders, and I have family and friends and people who love me, and I was super, super happy until you're about to chop my head off, and do what you have to do. I've lived a happy life as a gremlin by leaving the Ten Thunders, and you were, even after your father's death, you're still a weapon of the Ten Thunders. And she's like, something to consider, and she kills him. But then that's a moment for the Brewmaster to actually have plot relevance, to interact with another character, to possibly even change her mind on a subject. And again, leads to all that other stuff I was saying. So I think in order to get the Bayou, I'll wrap this up. In order to get the Bayou relevant, you have to do something that makes them personally angry. They can't just be like, we decide to do something. It's like, oh, you did something to us, therefore now we care.
You need a Watchmen moment.
Yes, you need them to kill the comedian for all the rest of the Watchmen to leave retirement.
I think if you want to get the Bayou pissed and unified, that's a great way to do it, is kill the Brewmaster, because like you said, he's the one person that they all universally like. I'm not sure I can see Misaki going and doing it personally, because her character arc kind of has her at a point now where she's not doing that kind of thing, but maybe, who knows how much how much spite or regret she has about the Brewmaster situation. It doesn't seem like she has a lot, but she obviously sent this crime boss after him, so maybe.
I don't think she even really knows about him, but at the same time, there really is that interesting parallel between Brewmaster being raised from birth to be a weapon against the Gremlins, and Misaki just being a general purpose weapon by her father, the Oyabun.
Yeah.
Well, I mean specifically because like she doesn't see herself as a weapon of the Thunders anymore, because she's in charge of the Thunders, so she's the boss.
She's still the one pushing the Thunders to do things, and is still a powerful asset of the Thunders. And I think that would be an interesting parallel to be like, I really don't have a life outside of being the leader of the 10 Thunders.
Well, I almost feel like
if
he wants to pull at her heartstrings, the angle is more that he didn't betray her, he unbetrayed his people. Because by working with the Thunders, he was betraying the Gremlins, and I think that's
a great point
that she can identify with, right? Because she's all about her homeland and all that.
Yeah. As long as he ends up dead, it doesn't matter how he comes at it. It's
brutal.
It is. Again, I don't get me wrong. I love Brewmaster, but you don't even have to replace his rules. I mean, Wesley can just evolve into just being the Brewmaster again, like a Pokemon.
Do you see this as like a story that we get where that happens, and then it sort of just sets the tone going forward, or do you see this as like an actual story arc where instead of a Burning Man trilogy, we get like a Gremlin invasion trilogy where they're launching a full-on assault on the city?
I would love it to be a full-on Gremlin assault, but I don't think that's going to happen because because it's a single faction. They've tried very hard not to have one faction just be the bad guys. Yeah. Even when they did the whole thing with Nythera at the end of first edition, with that was basically just Seamus being a bad guy, but all the factions were all coming in and piling on. Whereas if you make the Gremlins the designated bad guy faction of an entire arc, I don't think that really works from a setting perspective.
Mm.
But if you set a personal rivalry between like the Ten Thunders and the Gremlins, or the Gremlins and I don't know, like let's say the Guild is the one that ends up killing Somerteeth Jones, like that's the way you end up making that an interesting story, is you give them a personal rivalry towards one of the 8 other factions, even though they hate all the other factions equally. They now have a reason to actually leave the Bayou and attack people.
Well,
And be more than annoyances.
if they set up the guild as the antagonist, there's lots of other allies they could potentially recruit, because everybody else also hates the guild except for the explorers, really.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah,
and I think the same could be said of the Ten Thunders too. There's plenty of characters who have been burned by the Ten Thunders.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I can see tons of characters like, yeah, I don't want to have anything to do with the Ten Thunders. Now Lucas McCabe is a Explorer Society Bayou model instead of.
Yeah, just keep tossing McCabe around faction to faction.
Eventually, he'll have the whole rainbow and the. Yep. Nate, what do you got? What's your pick for where this comes from?
I feel like there is like a thread you could pull with almost every master or keyword.
Yeah.
Probably my biggest hope is that the Clampets actually become canonized. And that would probably involve the hints that Meridian is maybe our next big threat that we're dealing with. From what we got at the end of Ashes.
Yeah.
That would put them right on the front line of that fight. And if that is a thing they're dealing with, that probably puts them in direct intersection with like Maxine and the EVS, like actually getting back on the boat and dealing with that, and anyone else who's trying to deal with that existential threat at the edge of the bayou. Is going to come directly into conflict with that.
Right. So there's the idea that the gibbering hordes are under the influence of Meridian, and if Meridian is escaping from her prison, then potentially, they're going to be invading from the ocean, which means that the Clampets they live there. So,
right.
And up till this point, we, the only little bit of lore that we got was that they're sort of holding off the initial, a couple of gibbering hordes that have been popping up and attacking them. So that could turn into a big thing.
And that's all just been in personal bios is the main thing.
Right. It's not a story. It's just a mention.
Besides that, like whatever Ophelia's dealing with at the Red Cage, like it feels like there's like angles that you could set up where, you have your next arise of the meta plot, the tyrants or whatever it be. And you have 2 angles you can come at. You can come at from the sea with Meridian, and then something else. Hamlin was still a lingering threat, which then maybe intersects with Parker's dealing with or Zip's dealing with Parker. Ophelia at the Red Cage, whatever's still going on there with all the abominations that are pouring out at various intervals.
Mm-hmm.
We never got a follow up on Ulix post Burning Man's fall.
I want to know if Honey's okay.
Yeah, like Honey better. I assume, given that they were kind of trying to mechanically make the Burning Man work while also pulling him out of the spotlight.
We're having our cake.
That essentially, Honey can essentially flare up and become big giant pig every once in a while, as opposed to that is the current state of the pig.
Yeah. I mean, every single master in Malifaux has some sort of magic, which is how they actually have their master abilities. Mm-hmm. But maybe Ulix figures out, oh, cool, all I need to do is the equivalent of just like flicking on a lighter and holding it under her chin, and she lights like a pilot light, and then she goes into her full burning pig form.
Right.
And now we have the cult of the burning pig.
Yeah, and then the other angle I'm really interested in is, and this is partially from a mechanical standpoint too, is the intersection of Ma's gang, the Trixie keyword and the Foundry keyword, and the Arcanists in general, with the raid on Hollow Point, and then also just like the Gremlins who seem okay with just working on the rail line every once in a while. There's something there, and whether it be an alliance or some kind of friction between the two, is very interesting to me.
Yeah, it seems like friction is more likely the way they'd go, but I would like to see that something more nuanced there, because we get this, like obviously they stole a bunch of stuff from Hollowpoint, and that's how they're making these constructs and all that type of stuff. But Sparks and some of the
Survivors, the Rock Hopper.
Like the Rock Hopper, I think they just stole from the
right. That's just derelict technology,
right?
But same with the soulstone miners.
But Sparks and the Survivors work with the Foundry just because they feel like it, and like no one really understands why. But I think there's potential there for an interesting something, for more than just let's fight them. Like, I don't know where to go with that, but.
Right, I think there's something there where maybe Ma gets a deal to get involved in Arcanist plots effectively, and maybe that causes friction amongst the other Gremlins who are like, why is she now working with the humans? Like that's strange. That seems non-Gremlin-y, and so like maybe there's divisions of Gremlins now deciding, because we are starting to get more like Gremlins working with people and vice versa. Like we're seeing like Fly Six Shots, selling guns to the LaCroix, Bo Fishbacher dealing with the EVS, the White Rabbit Company.
Mm-hmm.
One more that was Judd and Honey working with Harold Tull. Like we're getting more outward integration, and it's nice to see, and I'd like to see that actually explored in a more concrete sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've got these characters, but we've not gotten stories, and that's what we haven't got more stories, so that's what I want to see.
Exactly.
There's even one that you haven't mentioned, which is Ezekiel, the Ezekiel Gautreaux, leader of the Gautreaux family, isn't even in the Bayou faction. He's a pure resurrectionist model.
But at least till now, we don't have an indication that like that's because he interacts with the Rezzers. It's just that he is in fact a necromancer, right? So that's more.
And he's bitter with Somer. is his main. my whole justification for him being just purely a resurrectionist is that he's just so bitter with Somer. He's not going to work with anyone outside the Gautreaux. I wish he had the whiz bang keyword. But that does remind me. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the major plot thread that's the lingering plot thread, the Black Dragon.
Yeah.
Like that is a major thread, and I really want to see that explored. And that's another angle that maybe that's another force that is colliding with the dealings with Meridian and the Red Cage. And
so for the people who don't watch all of my videos or listen to all your podcasts, you want to just tell people who the Black Dragon is?
Yes, so the Black Dragon is the presumptive other half of the dragon, which is Shenlong, the tyrant that was currently within Shenlong.
Yeah,
is currently within Shenlong, but dormant.
Yeah, that's right. When during the Tyrant War, the dragon split into two entities. One went Earthside, and one went and hid in the Bayou. And the few descriptions that we've gotten of the Black Dragon is that she is effectively a very powerful necromancer who's been teaching the Gautreaux and the Bokors their art of spirit necromancy. Which again, we've gotten a couple little hints sprinkled in, mostly in the Through the Breach books. But it's a very interesting character. I'd like to see take center stage.
Yeah, and it's implied that she's one of the reasons why you have the three of the big memorable names of the Gremlin families, which is the Longs, the Tongs, and the Numa. Is because their lands are all very close to the Black Dragons, and it's possible that she's either a human who came through one of those little Ten Thunders mini breaches at some unknown point in time and became possessed by the other half of the dragon and became immortal, or just always was there, or some other thing. It's we don't know how much interaction the dragon has with his other half. The other half of the dragon.
Yeah, it's definitely a strange thing. We don't really understand much about the tyrants, but how that works, and if they're aware of each other, or if they could reunite, or I don't think any of that stuff is necessarily written up till this point. So it definitely seems like that's something that will have to come up at some point in the future, because it's a tyrant. It's half a tyrant. So it seems like it will have to be relevant. I just wanted to throw it out there, though. The other thing we've learned recently is that the Gautreaux live around the ruins of Kythera.
Yeah.
And they had been, so I just recently posted the video and Gary was in it, but we played through the Hand That Feeds, which is a Through the Breach adventure from years ago, actually, where Bash gets introduced and he has a fragment of December from when December got defeated at Kythera and swims around in the waters around Kythera, and the Gatros were like making offerings to him and stuff like that. So I don't know if that will become relevant again because we already got Bash and he's just December and obviously on Bayou, but I don't know if that's going to play into, maybe one day we'll get a Gatro keyword with the Black Dragon as the master, and Bash could also join that faction. That would be kind of cool.
Little slipped in there. I'd be into that.
Cool. Yeah.
I would love to see, in going off of what you were saying, I would love to see Ma become Bayou Arcanist as a dual faction, or I can't see her becoming Bayou Ten Thunders because that's the other half of Foundry. But I think Bayou Arcanist gives her more fun mechanical plaything toys if they're going to lean into the mechanical aspect. And then I would love to see Ezekiel or the Black Dragon become Bayou Resurrectionist.
Yeah, I could see if the Black Dragon becomes a master being Bayou Resurrectionist.
He gets that keyword. Well, yeah, I can see Ezekiel getting that keyword as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that makes thematically and
the one other thing I think that would be cool to explore that would be a good way to integrate more Gremlin characters is I think you could introduce some dealings at Edge Point, the human town just off the edge of the bayou on the the western side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like to believe that there's a way you can make like a more integrated society there because they're right there. They're our neighbors.
Yeah, so we know that there's some trading that goes on there. That was actually a big focus of a setting of a Through the Breach campaign I ran in person years and years ago. We know that there's some trading that goes on between gremlins and humans there, and there's human smugglers that go off into the bayou and trade with the gremlins and vice versa. So theoretically, in the background, quietly, that there is interaction between humans and gremlins going on there. It's just that we don't see it, and I definitely think that could be a focal point for where we would see more of that for sure. That would be interesting. It's a cool setting too. It's one of the safest parts of Malifaux, just because stuff doesn't go down there, even though there's gremlins there, which is kind of curious.
It's both safe and dangerous because I feel like you're safer from like faction politics, but also there's just the danger of being out on the edge of the bayou.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it doesn't even get attacked much, like from Neverborn, and like the guild presence there is pretty light because they just don't feel that they need the security. Like, it's strangely peaceful, which is cool. Except it stinks like shit because it's near the bayou. So
yeah,
it's safe because you're not likely to get killed by a saber-toothed Cerberus. It's dangerous because every single person you walk by on the street has at least a pistol, often a shotgun, and half the people you're walking by on the street have absolutely no trigger discipline and also are also 2 feet tall.
And
drinking Gremlin moonshine.
There you go. I think just to build off of what you brought up before, Nate, I think so I mentioned that Ophelia is a very interesting character for me because she's like the more intelligent, and like clearly the way she's, again, we very rarely see her in narrative. She's never had her own story. But she's characterized as being particularly intelligent and like forward thinking, and she's like planning for things and like trying to deal with the rabble that is the rest of her family. But obviously she's got this she lives on the border of the Red Cage Pit, and that's a plot thread that was in book 2. Like, it got introduced in book 2, and there was hints about that we might learn some more stuff about the abominations and what was going on down there, and it's just never, and like every once in a while we just get a little mention of it and then it just goes away again, and we've never gotten any resolution on any of that stuff, and I really want to see that explored more, even if it doesn't become like a major plot thread, because whatever's going on under there probably isn't that important. It's probably just a repository of undead weird things from long ago, but I would like to get
who knows,
or some exploration of that.
I was just going to say, there's in one Through the Breach adventures, technically 2 of them actually. There's the Welcome to Providence adventure storyline, and am I allowed to do spoilers for that? I don't know. It's kind of sort of like background spoilers for the setting of that Through the Breach adventure series.
Go ahead.
But it's very.
I'll cut it out.
Fair enough. In that story, you're trying to figure out how to fix the well, basically, and it kind of spirals out of control from there. At the bottom of the well is this enormous stone egg that is constantly leaking water. And in book 2, you find out that that's actually a Meridian artifact, and inside is a spawn of Meridian, kind of like the Horomatangi, or is the big Hydra one from the Cult of the Burning Man also a Meridian? I can't remember, but it's a big spawn of Meridian. And in that same book, you find out that the well is just a part of this enormous spiderweb series of underground caverns that are underneath the entirety of the Badlands. And it's implied that they start in the bayou and the ocean out there and come through the bayou and into the Badlands, and they just crisscross under everything. And that's how I think Meridian will become plot relevant to a technically landlocked city like Malifaux. Is Meridian's going to go through those tunnels, start popping up out of the ground with fish monsters. Everyone's going to be like, we're like 50, 60 miles from the sea. What's going on? They're coming out of the ground like moles. And at the same time, that's when you get the relevance of the archipelago that the Sirens used to live on. The Sirens being the society that was brought low by Meridian, and Shazul got sunk into the water and became the Bayou. That's how everyone's gonna be like, how do we stop Meridian? Let's go find out if the Sirens knew anything, and so let's go explore Kythera again. And that basically brings Malifaux to the Bayou.
Yeah, the only reason that I am hesitant to say that I think that, like, the only thing that stops me from just thinking that Meridian's the next big bad is that if Meridian is operating through the Gibbering Hordes, they don't really have much presence in the Malifaux side of the game. They have obviously a very big presence in the other side. They're one of the main factions, but I'm not sure if they'll make that a big focus of a plot for the next book, just because, unless they do something dramatic and like either put out a new crew that is Meridian focused, or add a bunch of characters, or change Meridian's lore, like develop the lore where Meridian takes over an existing faction in some way. I would be
because you want the lore to mimic the tabletop.
You want to be able to play that. Yeah, it should be represented in the game in some way,
as close as possible.
So
if there's a cool thing in the lore, it should either be playable in the lore, or some person involved should be important with the lore. You can't just have a cool thing happening in the background.
Because at the end of the day,
I wish I was doing that. That seems more cool in the game.
Right, because at the end of the day, the narrative of the game is to sell more plastic war dollies. So they're not going to sell plastic war dollies if there's no plastic war dollars for the big bad. So I'll be curious. I mean, there's obviously things they could do with that, though, right? There's ways they could develop that, but it'll be interesting to see. I think, but that actually leads into the next thing that I was going to mention, which is the Sunken City, which is the other, the twin city of Malifaux, Sancor Sid, which is, we've seen show up in the lore before, with particularly the Explorer Society and McCabe kind of going down there and finding some stuff, but. And actually now we've gotten it mentioned with the who are the pirate gremlins in the new book?
Oh, the Swashbuckler and Mossbeard.
And Mossbeard, yeah. So Mossbeard apparently knows that place because he was marooned there for an extended period of time, or he thought he was.
Quote, unquote.
I thought he was marooned in Kythera, but I was wrong on that.
It's the Sunken City specifically. Yeah, it's a little further away. So. This is obviously, there's lots of ways this could become relevant, but there's probably lots of mysteries and interesting things down there. There's lots of strange beasties that he encountered and now knows about, but, also potentially connections to Meridian and the ancient history of Malifaux. So there's a lot of ways that could go. I actually thought when we originally got the Clampets announced, but we didn't really know who they were, I thought they were going to deal with the Sunken City because it seemed like that was becoming more relevant in the lore. And I thought they were going to live around there and kind of be experts at exploring it, but it turns out they're not, but still have plenty of ways that could become relevant.
I originally thought they were going to worship Meridian, and they were going to be like people who are like, oh man, this powerful sea goddess is giving us all this free food by sending these fish people. Yum yum yum.
I mean, that could still be the angle they go, right?
They're relatively unexplored. You could literally change the characters on a dime,
right?
their gremlins are very easily corruptible, and one of the things that can corrupt is a tyrant.
Well,
and boy, howdy, is Meridian a tyrant.
yeah, I mean that's what tyrants do, right? They need minions, so maybe they
That's
take over the.
kind of the thing, though, is that when you say that, though, but it seems like so far the gremlins as a whole are not very susceptible to whatever the tyrants have going on.
Yeah, I mean
and whether or not that's just because they haven't been written in, but that whole thing seems to kind of swerve them a little bit.
It might be a Hobbit thing, right? The hobbits are not susceptible to the power of the ring kind of deal.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be shocked, honestly.
The most direct statement on that is Ulix and Honey.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, we didn't even get a gremlin under the influence of the Burning Man. True.
Exactly.
We got to pay.
I do think that it's not so much that gremlins are inherently immune or resistant, or even that they're particularly inherently corruptible. It's that they're very selfish creatures, and they've been kind of overlooked by all the tyrants, and they're just like, why would I even bother with gremlin minions when I can get humans, which are like 10 times as smart, almost as populous. They live in somewhere that's really plot relevant.
Yeah.
And they aren't liable to blow their head off with a shotgun by accident by falling on their gun while they take a nap.
I think the most obvious answer is just that they're not powerful enough, because we clearly see the tyrants like deciding what hosts to take based on how powerful they are, and
as a frame of reference, Wong is very clearly corrupted by the Oni, not in the way that they want, obviously. He wants to be doing very specific things,
right,
but through a combination of not being competent enough to actually do the rituals that they tell him to do, even when they give him step-by-step instructions, and being just kind of lazy and being like, yeah, I'm totally doing it. Are you doing the ritual out there? Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah. And maybe it's also like partially this, partially that. Like you said, though, like, what if the easiest way to get a gremlin to do what you want them to do is to just ask?
Yeah.
It's engage in commerce. Right. Like you said, Meridian shows up and offers a free feast of fish. All you have to do is kill it yourself, and the Clampets go,
I will give you a shiny bauble if you will go do my bidding. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
That sounds good.
And a big hat.
I saw that ballyhoo bucket. Yeah. I saw that ballyhoo bucket, and that's pretty cool. What if I gave you a book that was 10 times as long and covered in magical cannons? You had me at magical cannons. Oh boy, hell yeah.
And like the Black Dragon, like, here, I'm going to teach you necromancy, and whatever happens. I'm not going to influence you. I'm just going to teach you.
Mm-hmm.
So the last point I was going to make about the Red Cage Pit is not only do we want to see that develop, but I also want to see Ophelia become a real character and have some sort of story. And I want that story. This is my wish list. This is like number 2 on my wish list. I want that story to involve her teaming up with Perdita, and I want a scene a la Mr. and Mrs. Smith with the two of them with their guns back to back, surrounded by Red Cage abominations. If I don't get that art, I will cry.
Like when you mentioned bringing back up the Red Cage Pit, I was thinking it'd be a good angle to explore the two of them finally realizing that hey, this requires all of us, and it is
common.
We're in the direct line of fire, but you guys are next.
You're the next step, yeah, and they know that because they've obviously dealt with the Red Cage Pit a bunch before. So I certainly don't think that Perdita would be against it, and I think Ophelia herself would be, a common enemy. We should team up. It might be hard for her to convince the rest of the gremlins underneath her to do it, but I think they'll go along with it once she kind of explains how important it is. Again, it's an existential threat for everyone. So I think that would be really cool, and it would be another interesting way to kind of get more gremlin human interaction that is not just simple combat. But I think the last big one, and we mentioned him already, is Wong with his 3 demon bag, because obviously the Oni are invading Japan as we speak, and that's another, at least on the TOS side of things, that's like a big part of the story that's developing now. So he's got this bag with some Oni in it, and maybe it's got a gate to the beyond, and he's talking through it, or maybe they're just trapped in there, or what. Or I don't, we don't know exactly what's going on with it, but he's got some.
I think they implied that it's like a minor gate, essentially, like a self-contained minor gate.
Right.
I believe that's what's been implied so far.
Yeah.
Which again, what does that mean?
It means he could jump in that bag and go to the beyond if he wanted to. Is what it means.
Oh no.
Or they could come. Again, the gates are like a way that You normally you can't get out of the Beyond, or it's very hard to exist outside the Beyond if you're an Oni. But the gates are a way that they can do that. So in theory, they could. It seems like up to this point they can't figure out how to do it, or they need his help to unlock it, or something's going on there. But that's obviously potentially a huge part of that story with the Oni and the invasion. So I would find it especially interesting to see him interact with the Earthside stuff and maybe end up in that game. But at the very least, there should be some resolution there, because Wong basically got the 3 demons bag and now has just been wandering around the Bayou looking for friends for the last 2 editions, and like nothing, he hasn't done anything. So and obviously that's like a huge deal in terms of the overall story. So
and he's said to hate the 10 Thunders, but hasn't really done anything about them other than steal from one wizard and get involved in one pit fight, and that was about it. And I think it would be really interesting if I can't remember the name of the overlord of all the Oni, General or Daimyo something. Ling Shusi, thank you.
He's not a playable character, but he's like the big that they're.
That's right. Yeah, if Ling Shusi is the one who's directly communicating to Wong, and he tells him, "You got to go work with the 10 Thunders," and he's like, I don't have to. And then Ling Shusi like reaches a big hand up and grabs him by his neck. He's like, "No, you will." And he's like, "Oh, okay. I guess I will, boss." And that's how you get Wong to be dual faction 10 Thunders and Gremlins. And again, just we had these models that were connected to the other factions, like the Tri-Chi, that no longer are. They separated, and I think you got to bring back those dual faction models in other ways to bring the factions together and get them involved again.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they could, especially if we get an edition change at some point in the near future, we could see a lot of crews changing allegiances like we did last time around. So I don't think it's out of the question. I would be surprised to see Wong join 10 Thunders, only because I don't think they've ever done a repeat of a. I mean, not to say that they couldn't, but I don't think they've ever done a repeat of a dual faction pairing, and it would be very curious to see them turn him into the old Brewmaster. But I do agree with your point that like it is a little weird if you're a Thunders player. I was a Thunders player and had Brewmaster, and then couldn't play Brewmaster anymore, so I'm in that boat.
I ended up picking up a lot of 10 Thunders models because he was dual faction. I was originally just a Bayou player, picked up a bunch of stuff for 10 Thunders, and now I just end up playing both Bayou and 10 Thunders because of it.
Well, that's how they get you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the 10 Thunders was just such a genius thing, because that's the first faction I bought in the game, and you just end up with every other faction. Something.
Yep.
Here's your easy link to, if you want to play Rezzers, here you already have it on low, so why not go pick up Molly, and it's just slippery slope, baby.
Oh yeah.
They know their market.
Yeah. They know we're all collectors, and it's easy. It's easy to get us. But I think that's all of the stuff that I want to talk about. Do you guys have anything else that you want to touch on as far as the Bayou and why we want them to be plot relevant? Please, we beg you.
Yeah, I mean, I think
go ahead.
A lot of the I think the kind of the pain that kind of came, the reason I think we're talking about this now is the format change to the storytelling. It was fine when it was, everyone has either their part in the book that is specifically their faction, or at the start of the edition, a faction book that definitely have stories about said faction. Like, no questions asked, you will have lore about your faction either in your section of the book or in your book. This last trilogy, this arc of Burns, Madness, and Ashes, changed that up. It's a single story in each book, and the whole thing could be considered its own trilogy of stories. I mean, it really is.
Right. And because it was hyper-focused on the A plot that was changing the state of the world, the Gremlins just MIA.
With a great deal of focus on the shiny new faction as well. Like, that can't be dismissed, that also, like, you've really put a lot of emphasis on the Explore Society.
Yeah.
So that meant that, someone had to get left behind, and it happened to be the easiest to cut faction.
Yeah, it's I think there's definitely a problem. I've talked about this quite a bit in the last couple of months in different capacities, but I think there's definitely a problem with the way that they do the lore, in the sense that there's so many characters, and there's 8 factions, and there's 60 odd masters, and there's
Yep.
60 plus named henchmen, and like there's characters that aren't part of aren't miniatures that are relevant in the plot, and it becomes very difficult. Obviously they can't please everybody, right? Everybody's not going to get a 70-page story that focuses on their favorite master. But, I think the reason that I wanted to do this was because I think they really have been ignoring an eighth of the game up till this point. And, obviously there's going to be ebbs and flows. Like you said, the Explorer Society got a huge focus in, especially the last book in Ashes. And, other factions kind of come and go. One of the books had a lot more focus on the Arcanists, and sometimes you get a lot more focus on the Guild, and that's just how it's going to be. But it definitely seems like there's a deliberate, like, we're just not paying attention to the Bayou at
right.
all. Like,
and maybe this is projecting, but that might be part of this whole, boiling point of, we just had the global campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Brewmaster won the global campaign.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I can't.
I'm so flabbergasted by that. I still can't believe it.
Same.
And I believe in my heart of hearts that there is like a solid reason for that. And I know, because I was part of it, was that Bayou players want lore. And if they have presented an opportunity where if this character wins in this aspect, we will definitely get some kind of lore.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Listen, they promised us lore.
I can be a pessimist sometimes, and my number one fear is that they're going to be like, oh, cool, she got drunk, and then just decide, oh, forget all this future fate of Malifaux stuff. I'm going to get drunk. And she goes out and gets daiquiris with Brewmaster, and that's all we get. Whereas I'm sure if we got the lore for like Academic or for Bandit or Red Chapel, it'd be a lot more, relevant to the future of Malifaux. But my fear is because we're getting such a comedy version of Nia with a Hawaiian T-shirt and everything.
Margaritaville.
It's Margaritaville. It's very Margaritaville, and I'm worried that we're just going to get another comedy story, and that would be very sad. But my big, this is our big chance at forcing plot relevance onto Wyrd.
Yeah. I choose to believe they can do something robust and do a robust storytelling with that version of the character. I believe they can do that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I don't know if I know Matt wrote the first part of her lore. I don't know if they're planning to have him write the second. They probably will, because he is on staff, and he wrote the first part. So the stories that he's written so far have been pretty focused on interpersonal stuff. Like he wrote the story where Bass and Jedza meet up and then go off to the cave and get the MacGuffin for the machine that later became part of the machine. And there was a lot of really good interpersonal stuff in that story. And a handful, I think he's written 5 or 6 stories in the past. So I think he could certainly do it. I think he has the chops for it if that's the direction they want to go. My understanding between all of the conversations that I've had with various people is that there is a deliberate effort on Wyrd's part to maintain the gremlininess of the gremlins.
Yeah.
Right. They are intentionally trying to, when the gremlins show up, make sure they maintain the comic relief aspect of the gremlins, which my hope is just that they find a way to do both. And I do think it's possible, and I do think they've done it before in small parts, but my hope is that they find a way to make it have a serious aspect of the story, have there actually be character development, have there actually be a plot with something that happens other than just comic violence. Mm-hmm. But they don't have to. I truly believe they don't have to betray the Gremlin legacy to do that. So I think they can have their cake and eat it too. In that sense, it's just I think they're gonna have to make an effort to do that. Right? They're gonna have to try to intentionally do that. If we get a story that's just Nia partying on the beach with other Gremlins, I will be very disappointed.
I agree.
I think that you don't have to look any farther than the biggest war game out there, which is Warhammer 40K, to see that there is a comedy faction that is also very plot relevant and a genuine threat in the Orcs.
Yeah.
And it's like, because orcs are hands down the comedy faction in the game. They're probably the only thing in Warhammer that is kept its comedy roots, and that doesn't make them any less present in the story or any of that. And if the gremlins are, like I said, invading, you can still have those goofy bits where the gremlins do a raid on, I don't know, some Arcanist warehouse, and they lose 99% of their forces, or they somehow have like 115% fatality rate amongst their agents, but they still end up burning the place to the ground. And it had some really important structure for, I don't know, Karis or Hoffman, and it's gone now. And now Hoffman really hates gremlins, even though there aren't any physical gremlins left that were part of that raid to take revenge on.
Yeah, I'd still like to see it be less about just a straight conflict. I think that's one way they could do it. I think that's especially if it's not just going to be like another.
It's certainly the most straightforward way.
Yeah,
and there's nuance you can do in multiple. You've got multiple keywords and characters in multiple factions. Anyways, you can have some that are being more aggressive and having direct conflict with humans, and others that are maybe being more diplomatic. It's
yeah,
you can explore multiple angles.
That was what my
Exactly.
point was going to be, is that I think true to the rest of the Malifaux lore, wherein every faction has different people that are pursuing different goals and that handle things differently. I don't think the entire Bayou should go invade Malifaux, but I think maybe if Sommer goes and invades Malifaux, while Ma goes off and makes an alliance with Mei Fang and Perdita and Ophelia, go have a shooting spree in the Red Cage Pit, like I'm all about that. So
all of those things can happen at the same time.
Right, exactly. And Zip and Parker can go off and have a date up in the mountains.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out and talking Bayou-y stuff. Where can people follow you, Mr. Nate?
I'm just follow Steam Powered Scoundrels. I'm on the various Discords, usually under 2 gremlins in a trench coat. I'm usually fairly loud when I'm loud.
What about you, Gary?
I'm also on the various Discords. I'm Gary Ginderhall. Again, I don't have a YouTube channel or anything, but all you have to do is look back through the history of the various Discords. I'm sure you'll find me somewhere.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, guys.
This was fun. Good chat.
Huge thank you to the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Powered Scoundrels, Dogmatized, Devin, and the Spilled Pain Pot. And thanks for watching.